Good morning, students. Welcome to the class of chemistry. In a series of basics concept of chemistry, in our earlier class, we had discussed about how a chemist know a particular compound has a particular number of atoms of an element. In the same series, we had discussed about ionic bond. In today's series, we will discuss about covalent bond. In our previous chemistry class, we had discussed about ionic bond. So today we will discuss about covalent bond. Now, what is covalent bond? Covalent bond, it is the bond formed due to the sharing of electrons. Now, covalent bond is sharing the number of electrons. And in our previous class, we had discussed about ionic bond. In ionic bond, the bond formed due to the transference of electrons, due to which the cations and anions are formed to neutralize each other. While in covalent bond, there is always sharing of electrons. By sharing of electrons means if we are taking two elements or two atoms of different elements, they used to share their electrons to make a compound. There is no ions formation in this. They are just sharing their electrons to form a bond. Let's see the diagrammatical representation of covalent bond. Let's take an example of carbon dioxide. We know carbon has atomic number 6. So its electronic configuration is 2,4. Oxygen has atomic number 8. So its electronic configuration is 2,6. We will use their valence shell electrons to share. Let's take an example. Carbon has 4 electrons and oxygen has 6 electrons in its valence shell. Now carbon dioxide has 2 oxygen atoms. Now how will these atoms share their electrons? Let's take a look. These are paired electrons. These two are unpaired electrons. Let's take these two unpaired electrons on one side. Similarly, carbons, these two unpaired electrons, we write it on one side. Similarly, carbons, these two unpaired electrons, we can write it like this. Similarly, we can write. Now, this carbon uses this oxygen's, these 2 electrons, and this carbon also uses this oxygen's 2 electrons. So we can make a circle in which carbon uses both oxygen's 2 electrons so that it can complete its outermost shell with 8 electrons. Carbon has already 4 electrons. Now it requires more 4 electrons to complete its shell. So carbon requires 4 more electrons to complete its valence shell electrons. That that means to make 8 electrons. But carbon has very small size. So it can't get or take 4 electrons from outside to complete its valence shell. Why? Because due to its smaller size, it cannot give, it requires, large amount of energy to get electrons. Similarly, we can say that it can also attain the noble gas configuration of helium by losing its 4 electrons, but that is also not possible because for losing 4 electrons it also requires a large amount of energy. That is why carbon always needs to share electrons. In this approach, I am explaining you the structure of carbon dioxide. In an approach to attain the stable configuration, carbon is trying to share its 4 electrons with 2 atoms of oxygen so that it can stabilize itself and stabilize oxygen also. Clear? Why carbon cannot transfer, or we can say lose, or accept or gain electrons? Because carbon has the smaller size of an atom. So for losing electrons or gaining electrons, it requires a lot of energy to gain or lose electrons, which is not possible to provide. So trying to attain its stable configuration, carbon has a tendency to share its electrons with another atoms. That is why most of the elements, most of the compounds that are formed with carbon atoms are covalent in nature. So, are you clear with the approach why carbon forms covalent bond? Now let's complete this formula. Now carbon is using both these oxygens 2 electrons to complete its 8 electrons. Similarly, now this oxygen, because what we are saying is sharing of electrons. If oxygen is sharing its electron with carbon, then carbon will also share its electrons with oxygen. So when this oxygen atom will use carbon's these 2 electrons to form a bond. Similarly, this oxygen will use these 2 these 2 electrons of carbon. Now how many pairs are shared? 2 pairs. That means oxygen and carbon will have double bond in them. Clear? Why there is double bond? Because carbon and oxygen are sharing 2 pairs of electrons with each other. That is why carbon and oxygen has double bond in them. Let's take another example of oxygen molecule O2 and nitrogen molecule N2. O2 molecules. Now oxygen has atomic number 8. So we can write its electronic configuration as 2,6. Oxygen, it's similarly. Now this oxygen and this both oxygen atoms will share their electrons. How we can represent both these? Let's write these two electrons like this and these two electrons like this. This oxygen will use these two electrons of this oxygen atom. Similarly, this oxygen will use these two electrons of this atom. Now, how many pairs are sharing? 2 pairs. So, oxygen, both in oxygen molecule, both oxygen atoms have double bond in them. Now, let's take an example of nitrogen molecule, N2. Nitrogen has atomic number 7, so its electronic configuration is 2,5. How we can write it? It has 5 electrons in its outermost shell. So these we can write like this. Let's take these 3, this lone pair. The electron pair of an element which does not take part during a chemical reaction or a bond formation, that pair of bond is called lone pair. Clear? There is 3 electrons, so we can write it right. So nitrogen atom has 3 electrons and it is a lone pair. This nitrogen will use these electron pairs and this nitrogen will use these electron pairs. Now, how many electron pairs are sharing them? 3 electron pairs. So, nitrogen will have triple bond in its molecule. Clear? Now, what is lone pair? Lone pair, it is an electron pair present in the valence shell of an element which does not take part in a bond formation. So now we had discussed 2 types of bonds, that is ionic bond and covalent bond till today's lecture. In next class, I will explain you how carbon dioxide knows a carbon has 1 atom and oxygen will have 2 atoms. This concept will be explained according to the empirical formula method, which is a type of a numerical method. So stay tuned to find your answer why or how atoms have a particular number of elements in a compound. In ionic bond, it is very easy to find the number of atoms in a compound because there is always a transfer of electrons in a compound. So how many electrons are transferring from one element to another, that will decide, or we can say how many electrons an element has to transfer or to gain will decide the number of atoms present in a particular compound. But in covalent bonds, there is much more other things to know about. In that step, we need to study about the empirical formula. So stay tuned to study about empirical formula to find the number of atoms present in a molecule of a covalent compound.